The frost came early that year, and it came hard. By the time the carriages began arriving at Larchmere House, the cobbles outside were white, and the breath of every groom and footman stood in the air like smoke. Inside, the smell was candle wax and hothouse lilies, and underneath it, the sharper smell of too many silk gowns crushed too close together. A fire roared in every hearth on the ground floor. Not one of them reached the third floor, where the nursery windows had frosted over from the inside. She was the kind of woman a ballroom never noticed, because a ballroom was never meant to notice her. Iris Colby was 22, thin through the wrists, with hands reddened from lye and cold water, and she had been hired for one night only, to mind the cloak-room and mend a hem if a hem tore. She was not pretty in the way that got remembered. She was capable in the way that got forgotten, right up until the moment it was needed. She had buried her mother 2 winters past, and her sister the winter before that, and what she had left of family was a nephew in a parish orphanage and a single black dress that had been let out twice. What she had that no one had thought to ask about was this: she knew how to quiet a crying child. She had done it 100 nights running. For her sister's boy, for the foundling babies at the almshouse where she'd once scrubbed floors for her supper. It was not a skill anyone paid for. It was not a skill anyone had ever thanked her for either. Before the night was through, the whole grand house would stop dancing to listen to one voice, small and off-key, singing somewhere above the chandeliers, and it would be hers. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss where this one goes. The ball itself was already loud by 9, the kind of loud that had a shape to it, violins under the murmur of 200 voices, the clink of glass, the scrape of dancing slippers on wax. Iris stood in the cloak-room off the main hall with an armful of fur-lined cloaks, and did not look up when the doors opened and closed, did not look up when a footman muttered that the Duke had not yet come down. She had heard the servants talking. The Duke of Larchmere had lost his wife to a fever 18 months back in this very house, and since then the boy upstairs had not slept easy a night in his life. Tonight was meant to be different. Tonight was meant to be the house's first grand evening since the morning ended. 140 guests, the finest thing Larchmere had done in 2 years. At 9:30 the crying started. It came down through the old plaster the way sound does in old houses, thin and continuous, a child worn past sleep and past comfort, screaming in the high broken way that meant he had been screaming a long while already. Nobody below seemed to hear it over the violins. Iris heard it. She had an ear built for exactly that pitch. She should not have left the cloak-room. She knew that even as she set down the cloaks and went to the servants' stair, nobody had sent for her. Nobody knew her name well enough to send for her. But she went up 2 flights in the dark, following the sound, because she had never once in her life been able to hear a child cry like that and do nothing. The nursery door stood ajar. Inside, a young nursemaid sat rocking a boy of perhaps 3 years old, her cap askew, her face wet with her own tired tears, saying his name over and over in a voice gone ragged with helplessness. The boy would not be comforted. He arched his back against her and screamed until his voice cracked, and then screamed on cracked. Iris did not ask leave. She set down her candle, crossed the room, and held out her arms. The nursemaid looked at her like a woman handed a rope in deep water. She did not ask who Iris was. She only gave the boy over. He was hot with crying, his small fists knotted in his nightshirt, and Iris did what she had done 100 nights for a child that was not hers to comfort either. She did not shush him. She did not tell him to stop. She held him upright against her shoulder, walked him slow in a circle, and began, very low, to sing. It was not a fine song. It was a washerwoman's song, the kind sung over tubs with no more than 4 notes to it, repeating she had learned it from her mother, who had learned it from hers. She did not sing it well. She sang it steady, and steady was the thing he needed. He fought her for the length of 1 turn about the room. Then 2. By the 3rd his fists had loosened, by the 4th his head had come down heavy and trusting onto her shoulder, and the terrible tearing sound of him had worn itself down into hiccups, and then into breath. She did not know, singing there in the candlelight with a stranger's sun gone slack and warm against her collarbone, that a man stood in the nursery doorway in his shirt-sleeves. His fine coat and cravat discarded somewhere on a chair below, watching her with an attention he had not given anything in 18 months. She did not know that he had come up the back stair alone, unable to bear 1 more turn about his own ballroom while his son screamed above him and no one could stop it. She did not know that the house had been told, quietly, that its master had a headache, so that no one would follow him up and see a duke standing in a nursery doorway like a man who had lost something and only just found it again. She only knew that the boy slept, and that the room had gone very quiet, and that somewhere behind her a floorboard creaked once, softly, like a held breath finally let go. She turned. A man stood in the doorway. Not a footman. His shirt was fine linen, but plain, no coat, no collar starched for company, his hair disordered as though he had dragged a hand through it more than once. In the low light she took him for perhaps a physician sent up from the ball, or one of the upper servants roused from below, someone with enough standing to be in the nursery and not enough to trouble her with questions. "He's asleep," she said, because it seemed the thing that needed saying first. The man did not move from the doorway for a long moment. So he is. He was only tired past the point of sleeping. It happens with little ones. They fight it hardest right when they need it most. She shifted the boy's weight, careful, competent, the way she had shifted a dozen other children who were never hers to keep. "He'll want water when he wakes." "Not milk. Water sits easier. You've done this before, more times than I could count for you." She said it plainly, without pride in it, the way she might have said the sky was grey. She did not curtsy. She did not ask his name. In the dim room, with a child's weight warm on her shoulder, rank had simply not occurred to her. And that, though she could not have known it, was the entire reason the man in the doorway did not move, did not speak again, for the length of 3 long breaths, only watched her lay the boy down in his cot and tuck the blanket close, and stand back from him, without once glancing round to see if anyone of consequence had noted what she'd done. She did not know then that the man in the doorway was the Duke of Larchmere. She did not know that he had spent 18 months paying physicians and nurses and specialists sent for from as far as Edinburgh, and that not one of them had done in 4 minutes what a stranger in a borrowed apron had just done, with nothing but her own 2 arms and a song with 4 notes in it. She did not know that he would remember this exact picture, her back to him, unthanked and unwatched by her own reckoning, for a very long time afterward. She only knew the room was quiet, and that it was time to go back down to the cloakroom before anyone noticed she'd been gone. She left the candle burning low on the shelf, gathered her skirts, and slipped past him in the doorway with a small nod, the kind of nod a servant gives another servant, nothing more. He let her go without a word, It was, she would learn much later, the hardest silence he had kept in a year. Iris came back down the servants' stair with her heart still beating fast from the climb, and no one below had missed her at all. She took up her post in the cloak-room as if she had never left it, straightened a fox fur wrap that did not need straightening, and told herself the whole thing had been nothing. A crying child. A song. It would have been strange not to help. She did not think of the man in shirt-sleeves again that night, or told herself she did not. She had learned young not to hold on to things that were not hers to hold, and a duke's household, even a warm one, was full of doors that closed the moment you tried to lean on them. It was Mrs. Pruitt, the housekeeper, who found her an hour before the last carriages left. Mrs. Pruitt was a broad, brisk woman with a ring of keys at her waist and a face that gave away exactly as much as she wanted it to, and not one thing more. She looked Iris over the way a woman looks over a bolt of cloth she is deciding whether to buy. You went up to the nursery. It was not a question, so Iris did not treat it as one. Master Theo was crying fit to wake the dead. I couldn't sit below and do nothing. Nobody sent for you. No, ma'am. And yet the boy is asleep, and Nurse Dobbs is downstairs drinking tea with her hands shaking, telling anyone who'll listen that a stranger walked in and did in 4 minutes what she and 2 physicians couldn't manage in a fortnight. Mrs. Pruitt's mouth did something that was not quite a smile. His Grace wishes to know the name of the woman who calmed his son. Iris felt the colour go out of her face. I only sang to him, ma'am. Anyone might have done the same. Anyone did not. You did. Mrs. Pruitt studied her a moment longer. What's your name, girl? Iris Colby. And you're hired for tonight only, cloak-room, through the agency in town. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Pruitt was quiet for a moment, turning something over that she did not share. Go home tonight, Colby. Someone will call on you within the week. Iris did not sleep that night for wondering what it meant, and told herself in the morning that it likely meant nothing at all, that great houses forgot their debts to servants faster than servants ever forgot their service. She went back to her small room above the chandler's shop and her mending work, and did not think herself owed anything, because she had asked for nothing, and a woman who asked for nothing learned not to expect it either. What she did not know, and would not know for some time, was that the Duke of Larchmere had stood in his study until well past 2 that morning, coat still off, staring at nothing, turning over a single fact that had lodged in him like a splinter. She had not known who he was. She had not curtsied, had not simpered, had not once glanced round to see whether the man in the doorway was worth impressing. She had only seen a crying child and gone to him, expecting no one to ever know, and she had been right, almost, because she had not counted on being seen at all. He had watched a great many people be kind to his son in the 18 months since his wife died. Every one of them had known, while they were being kind, that the Duke of Larchmere was somewhere nearby to notice it. He found, turning the splinter over and over in the dark of his study, that he did not trust a single one of those kindnesses the way he trusted the 4 minutes he had just watched through a nursery doorway, from a woman who believed the room held no one worth performing for. He did not send for her himself. That was not yet his to do, not with the household still watching him for any sign of what he'd lost and how he meant to carry it. Instead, he called for Mrs. Pruitt in the grey hour before dawn, when the last of the guests had gone, and the candles had guttered out one by one through the state rooms, and gave her instructions in a voice so quiet the housekeeper had to lean in to catch them all. "Find her a place in this house," he said. Nursery, if she'll have it. Don't tell her why. And if she asks, Your Grace. Then tell her Master Theo slept the whole night through for the first time in a year, and the house has decided it cannot spare her. He looked, for a moment, almost young. That much at least is true. Mrs. Pruitt did not ask the question that stood plainly behind his eyes. She had kept this house's secrets a long time, longer than most of its servants had been alive, and she understood without being told that the Duke did not want his son's new nursery maid to know that the man in the doorway last night, the one in shirt-sleeves with his hair undone, had been the Duke of Larchmere himself. It was a small deception, she told herself, walking back down the cold corridor with her candle guttering. A kindness, even. What harm could come of a man wanting, for once in his grieving life, to be looked at as only a man, before anyone had the chance to look at him as a title? She did not yet know how much would hang, months later, on exactly how that small deception unravelled. Iris came to Larchmere House the following week with a single trunk, and no expectations worth naming. Mrs. Pruitt met her at the servants' entrance, looked her over once more, and told her plainly that she was engaged as an under-nursery maid, wages paid quarterly, half-day free on Sundays, and that Master Theo's welfare was to be her whole concern and nothing else. Why me? Iris asked, because she could not quite believe her own good fortune, and had learned to be suspicious of things that arrived without a reason attached. Because the boy slept for you, Mrs., Pruitt said, which was true, and left out everything else, which was also in its way a kind of truth withheld, rather than a lie told outright. Iris took the place gladly. She had not eaten a full meal 2 days running in a month, and a roof and a wage and a small quiet boy to look after was more than she had let herself hope for since her sister died. She did not ask who had recommended her beyond the vague word of the household. She did not think to ask whether the master of the house had taken any particular interest in the matter. Dukes, in her experience, did not concern themselves with which maid minded the nursery linen. The nursery itself was a warm room on the 3rd floor, low-beamed, smelling of beeswax and clean wool, with a rocking horse gone soft in the paint from years of small hands. Theo was shy of her the first 2 days, watching her from behind Nurse Dobbs's skirts with his mother's eyes. Or so the housemaids whispered, though none of them said it where Iris could ask further. By the 3rd day he had put his hand in hers without being asked, to lead her to see a bird's nest fallen from the eaves, and by the end of the 1st week he would not go down for his nap unless she sang the 4-note-washing song, badly, exactly as she had sung it that first crying night. She saw the Duke rarely, and always at a distance, across a courtyard or through a library door left ajar, a tall dark-coated figure the household spoke of in hushed, careful terms. She had never been formally presented to him. It was not her place to be. What servants below stairs called his Grace, up close and unguarded, was a mystery to her still. Since the one time she had seen him unguarded, she had not known enough to recognise what she was looking at. He came to the nursery himself sometimes, in the evenings, after Theo's supper, dressed plainly as he had been that first night, coat left below, and she took him at first for perhaps an uncle, or the steward's son come to check the boy's lessons, someone with the run of the house and not the rank of it. He never corrected her. He watched her with Theo, the way a man studies a puzzle he has been given no full picture of, and asked her questions that had nothing to do with her place and everything to do with her. "You sing him the same song every night," he said once, standing by the cold hearth while she folded small linens. "He likes what's familiar. Children do, when they've had too much taken from them too fast." She did not look up from her folding. "It isn't a fine song. My mother sang it over the wash-tubs. I never thought to sing it anywhere finer. It seems to have done what physicians from Edinburgh could not. Physicians listen for what's wrong in a body. I only listened for what he wanted, which was someone steady and not clever. She caught herself and flushed, worried she'd spoken above her place to a man she took for a gentleman of the house, if not its master. "Forgive me, I don't mean to lecture. Don't apologise for being right," he said, and something in his face when he said it was almost. Though not quite. A smile. She did not know, folding linens in the firelight, that the boots that appeared outside her door a week later, sturdy and well made and exactly her size, with no note and no name attached, had been ordered by the same man standing at her hearth, after he noticed her thin soles letting in the wet on the walk to church. She did not know that the extra coal sent up to the servants' hall that month, or the physician quietly engaged to look in on a housemaid's ailing mother in town, traced back to the same closed hand. She only knew that Larchmere House, for reasons she did not examine too closely, seemed a kinder place than any she had worked in, and she was careful, in the way of a woman who has been disappointed before, not to trust it too far. The first secret kindness had been planted. She would not learn its source for months. By then a great deal else would have happened first, and not all of it gently. Spring came late that year, the kind of spring that arrived in fits, a warm week undone by a week of sleet. Larchmere House filled for the season, cousins and connections arriving to fill its guest rooms, and among them came Lady Corinna Vane, the Duke's late wife's cousin, a tall, handsome woman with a laugh like 3 practised notes on a bell, who had run the household's social calendar since the morning ended, and considered herself, by long habit if not by right, the natural mistress of its affairs. Lady Corinna noticed Iris the first afternoon, in the garden, kneeling in the grass to retrieve Theo's wooden horse from under a hedge, her hem soaked through, her hands green with grass stain. She noticed her again that evening, carrying the boy up to bed past the drawing-room where the family sat at cards, and made a point, in a voice pitched to carry, of asking who the ragged girl was that his Grace had let handle his heir. "The new nursery maid, my lady," someone answered. "How extraordinary," said Lady Corinna, in the tone of a woman remarking on weather. One would think, given who the boy's mother was, his Grace might have found someone a little more presentable to touch him. Iris heard it through the half-open door, Theo's head heavy and trusting on her shoulder, exactly as it had been that first crying night, and she did not stop walking, and she did not answer, and she did not let her face show one thing. It was midpoint of the season when the true blow landed. A garden party, 40 guests on the south lawn, croquet mallets and iced lemonade, and the Duke himself walking the grounds with his steward. When Theo, overtired and cross, threw himself down in the grass in the middle of the guests, and would not be lifted. Iris crossed the lawn without a thought for who was watching, and knelt to him, steady, unhurried, the way she always was, murmuring the boy back down out of his temper in under a minute while 40 guests looked on. Lady Corinna arrived at her shoulder before the boy had even quieted. "How dare you," she said, low enough for only the nearest guests to catch, which was, in its way, worse than shouting. Manhandling him in front of the whole county like some fishwife, dragging a child off the street. "Do you imagine your touch is fit for a duke's heir? Look at your hands, girl, look at what you are." Iris rose slowly, Theo's small fist still curled in her skirt, and did not raise her voice to match. "My hands are red because I've worked with them every day of my life, my lady. I've never been ashamed of that, and I don't intend to start now, in front of your guests or anywhere else. You forget yourself. I don't think I do. Iris looked at her steadily. I know exactly what I am. I wonder sometimes if you know what you are, underneath all that lace. A ripple went through the nearest guests, quickly hushed. Lady Corinna's face went white, and then a hard, furious red, and for a moment it seemed she might strike her there on the lawn in front of everyone. She did not. She turned instead and walked back toward the house, her skirts cracking behind her like a small, contained storm, and Iris was left standing in the grass with a duke's son's hand in hers and 40 pairs of eyes she had not asked for. She did not cry. She had trained herself long ago not to cry where it showed, and she did not intend to break that training over Lady Corinna Vane. She only picked Theo up properly onto her hip and carried him back toward the house, her spine very straight, her steps very even, and if her hands shook a little on the stair, no one there to see it but the boy, who did not care in the least what her hands were made of, only that they were steady enough to hold him. The Duke had not seen the exchange on the lawn. He heard of it within the hour, from 3 separate servants who could not agree on the exact words, but agreed entirely on the shape of the thing. A guest of rank humiliating a maid in front of half the county for the crime of comforting his son. He said very little when he heard it. He only asked, in a voice gone flat and careful, whether Iris Colby was still in the house, and was told that she was in the nursery, as though nothing at all had happened, singing Theo down for his afternoon rest. He went up the back stair himself, the way he had that first crying night, and stood a long moment in the nursery doorway before she noticed him. "I heard what was said to you on the lawn," he said. Iris did not look up from the boy in her arms. "It's nothing I haven't heard before, in one form or another. That doesn't make it right that you heard it here." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." She laid Theo down, drew the blanket over him, and turned to face the man she still believed was some cousin or steward's son with the run of the house. "May I ask you something plainly, since you've a habit of listening plainly to me?" "Always. Am I to be dismissed for it? For answering back to a lady of the house?" He was quiet a moment. "Not while I have any say in this house," he said, "which, as it happens, is a great deal of say." And then, because the words had come out closer to the truth than he'd meant to give her yet, he added nothing further, only inclined his head and left her to her work. And Iris stood alone in the nursery a long while afterward, turning that odd, weighted answer over and over, and could not yet make sense of it. The days after the garden party settled into something Iris recognised as the particular cold of a house that has decided, quietly and without a single word spoken aloud, that you no longer belong in it. Lady Corinna did not raise her voice again. She did not need to. She simply began arranging small omissions. A nursery order changed without Iris being told. A household meeting held without her presence, though it concerned Theo's routine directly. A whispered word here and there among the upper servants that a girl who answered her betters that way could hardly be trusted with delicate matters. Iris bore it the way she bore most things, with her chin level and her hands steady, and told herself it would pass, the way weather passed. It did not pass. It sharpened. The blow, when it came dressed as concern. Lady Corinna called Iris to the small morning room a fortnight after the garden party, sat her down across a polished table exactly as one might seat a tradesman come to be paid off, and informed her in tones of great reluctance that the household had decided a change was needed in the nursery. "His Grace is often from home this time of year," Lady Corinna said. "Business in town, the estates in the north. It falls to me, in his absence, to see the house properly run, and I cannot in good conscience keep a girl in a position of such trust who has shown herself so free with her tongue toward her betters. You'll understand. Does His Grace know of this? Iris asked, very quietly. His Grace trusts my judgment in domestic matters entirely. It was not strictly an answer, and Iris was clear-eyed enough to notice the gap in it, but she was also tired and proud in the particular way of the poor, unwilling to beg for a place she had once believed she'd earned honestly. Then I'll go, she said. She did not go to Mrs. Pruitt to plead her case. She did not send word to the man she still knew only as a kindly cousin of the house, the one who visited the nursery in shirt-sleeves and asked her plain questions, and had once told her, in that strange weighted voice, that she would not be dismissed while he had any say. She told herself that whatever say he had, he was from home now, in the north on business, and a servant did not go running after gentlemen who owed her nothing. She packed her single trunk that same evening. Theo cried when he understood she meant to leave, cried the high broken way he had cried that first ball night, and it was the hardest thing she had done in a long while to kneel and tell him, steady, that he would be well, that Nurse Dobbs would keep him warm, that the song would still work, even sung by someone else, though she did not fully believe that last part herself. I would have done it for anyone, she told Mrs. Pruitt at the servants' door the next morning, meaning the whole of her time in the house, the nursery, the boy, all of it, as though a plain accounting might make the leaving easier to carry. I never asked to be thanked for any of it. I only wanted to do right by him. Mrs. Pruitt's face, usually so carefully closed, showed something that might have been grief. I know it, Colby. Write to me when you're settled. Promise me that. Iris promised, because it cost nothing to promise, and walked out through the frost-hardened garden where she had first been humiliated on the lawn, past the hedge where she had once retrieved a wooden horse for a boy who was not hers to love, and had come, despite every rule she'd set herself, to love anyway. She took a room above a milliner's shop in town, with the last of her wages, and told herself, lying awake that first night, listening to strangers' footsteps on the stair below, that this was simply what happened to women like her. You were let in close enough to be useful, and then you were let go the moment your usefulness grew inconvenient to someone with more claim on the house than you. She did not know, could not have known, that the Duke of Larchmere had returned from the north 3 days after her dismissal, walked into a nursery gone silent and wrong, and demanded of Mrs. Pruitt in a voice none of the staff had ever heard him use, where Iris Colby had gone, and on whose authority. She did not know that Mrs. Pruitt, who had kept this house's secrets a long time, but had never once agreed to keep a cruelty, told him everything, plainly, without softening a word of it. She did not know any of that yet. She only knew the room above the milliner's was cold, and that she had left a boy behind who needed her, and that some part of her, some part she was ashamed of, and could not quite silence, had hoped, without ever admitting the hope aloud, that the quiet man from the nursery doorway might have come looking for her before she had to go. The letter came 4 days later, delivered by a groom in Larchmere livery, who would not say who had sent him beyond that he'd been told to wait for an answer. It was from Mrs. Pruitt, brief and characteristically plain, asking Iris to call at the house the following afternoon, on a matter she would not commit to paper. Iris nearly did not go. Pride argued strongly against it, and pride had kept her fed a long time when nothing else would. But Theo's face rose up in her mind, and under the pride there was a plainer, more stubborn thing, which was that she had never in her life walked away from an unfinished piece of care, and some part of her still felt Theo unfinished. Mrs. Pruitt met her not in the servants' hall, but in her own small sitting-room off the kitchens, warm with a fire and a kettle already singing, and sat her down with a directness that told Iris this was not a social call. "I owe you the truth of some things, Mrs., Pruitt said, and I've decided I'd rather you heard them from me than go on not knowing them at all. Go on, then. You were not dismissed on his Grace's word. He was from home when it happened, and Lady Corinna made free with an authority that isn't rightly hers to make free with." Mrs. Pruitt folded her hands on the table. "He came back 3 days after you'd gone, and near took the roof off this house, asking why." Iris said nothing, waiting, her tea untouched. "There's more you don't know, Mrs., Pruitt went on. "Do you recall the boots left outside your door last winter, with no note? I never learned who sent them. His Grace ordered them. He noticed your soles were letting in the wet on the walk to church, and he could not bear it, and he would not let his name be put to it, because he said a kindness with a name attached stops being a kindness and starts being a debt." Mrs. Pruitt watched her face carefully. "The physician sent to your old landlady's sick daughter 2 streets from here, the one who never asked payment. His doing as well, the extra coal sent to the servants' hall each hard month, going back further than you've even been in this house, to families you've never met. He asked me every time, not to say who sent it." Iris sat very still. Why would he do such things, and never once let it be known? Because he's spent his whole life being looked at as a title first, and a man never, Mrs., Pruitt said, gently now, and I think, though he's never said it plain to me, that he wanted just once to know his goodness was worth something on its own, without a coronet standing behind it to buy the gratitude. That still doesn't tell me why he'd trouble himself so much over a nursery maid he barely knows. Mrs. Pruitt looked at her a long moment, weighing something. "I think you know more of that answer than you're letting yourself believe, Colby. Think on the man who used to come to the nursery of an evening. Plain shirt, no coat. Asking you questions no gentleman of the house would trouble to ask a maid." She rose, gathering the empty cups. "Think on the night of the ball, and who might have been standing in a doorway you never thought to look at twice." Iris felt the floor of her understanding shift under her, slow and total, the way ice gives way not all at once, but in a long low groan before it breaks. She thought of shirt-sleeves in candlelight. She thought of a voice saying, "Not while I have any say in this house," which, as it happens, is a great deal of say. She thought of a man who had never once corrected her when she mistook him for less than he was, and had let her go on speaking to him plainly, freely, exactly as she would to no lord in England, because he had wanted, for once, to be spoken to that way. "He was there," she said slowly. "That first night. He was the one in the doorway." "He was, Mrs., Pruitt said, "and he has been watching you ever since, in the only way a man like him knows how to watch anyone, from a little distance, without ever once telling you the truth of who he was." Iris sat with that a long while in the warm kitchen, the fire popping once, low, and did not know whether what rose in her chest was anger at having been let believe a falsehood so long, or something else entirely, something closer to the ground, giving way beneath old certainties, and revealing, underneath, a kindness far larger than she had ever let herself hope for. "He wants to see you, Mrs., Pruitt said quietly. "Tonight, if you'll come. He said he'd wait as long as you needed, and not a moment less. Iris walked back to Larchmere House in the last grey light of the afternoon, with her heart going hard and slow by turns, rehearsing and unrehearsing what she meant to say, and arriving, in the end, with nothing prepared at all, because nothing she could have rehearsed would have been equal to a truth this large. Mrs. Pruitt showed her not to the grand receiving rooms, but to a small private study off the library, low-ceilinged and warm, a single lamp lit, the kind of room built for one man to sit alone in the evenings and not be found by anyone who mattered. The Duke of Larchmere stood when she entered. He had his coat on this time, correctly, formally, as though he had dressed with care for exactly this reckoning, and knew it would not save him from it. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Mrs. Pruitt told me who you are," Iris said. She did not sit, though he gestured toward a chair. "I think I'd rather hear the rest from you." He did not flinch from that. "Then you shall have it plain, since plain is the only way you've ever spoken to me, and I find I owe you the same in return." He set his hands behind his back, the way a man does when he means to hold himself steady through something difficult. "My name is Edmund Vane. I am the Duke of Larchmere. I was the man in the nursery doorway the night of the ball, and I let you believe otherwise for longer than I have any honest excuse for. Why? Because that night I watched a woman walk into a room believing no one of any consequence could see her, and do the kindest thing anyone has done for my son in 18 months, expecting nothing for it, not even to be known. I have spent my whole life surrounded by people who are kind to me because of what I am. I wanted, once, to know what a person was when they believed I was nothing at all. You showed me that, without ever meaning to show anyone anything." His voice, always so careful, roughened slightly. "I did not tell you afterward, because I was afraid that if you knew you would become careful with me, the way everyone in my life has always been careful with me. I could not bear to lose the one honest thing I'd found in a year of losing everything else. You let me be dismissed from this house, believing you had no say in it, when you had every say. I was in the north. I did not know until I returned, and when I learned what had been done in my name, I put it right within the hour, and I have not slept easy a night since, wondering how to tell you the truth of it without losing you a second time." He held her gaze, steady, unflinching. "I wanted to see who you were when you did not know I was watching. That is the only test I have ever trusted, your grace and mine both included, because it is the only one no one can perform for." Iris stood a long moment saying nothing, feeling the whole shape of the last months rearrange itself around this one confession. The boots, the coal, the physician, the man in shirt-sleeves asking her plain questions in a nursery firelight, all of it folding into a single, undivided truth. "I do not know whether to be angry with you or not," she said finally. "You may be as angry as you like. I will not defend the deception, only the reason for it, and I will not ask you to forgive it tonight, or any night before you are ready." He drew a slow breath. "I want you to have your choice in this, freely, without my rank standing over it and pressing you toward an answer you don't yet feel. I will not ask you to stay. I will not ask you to come back to the nursery, or to me, out of gratitude, or pity, or because a duke has asked it, and a duke's asking feels difficult to refuse. Whatever you choose, Theo will be cared for, and you will never want for a place in this county again. That much I have already seen to. That much was never in question. And if I choose to walk out that door and never come back, then, I will have lost the best thing that has happened to this house in 2 years, he said quietly, and I will have no one to blame for it but my own silence. But I would rather have your no, freely given, than your yes, because you believed you owed me one. I have had enough of people giving me what they believe I am owed. I would like, for once in my life, to be given only what is freely meant. The Duke stood very still while she took the whole of that in, and it struck her then, watching him hold himself so carefully upright, while offering her every possible door out of the room, that she had never once in all her life been handed a choice with nothing attached to it. Every kindness she had ever received had come with a debt folded quietly inside it. This one did not. "I'm not angry that you're a duke," she said slowly. "I think I'm angry that you let me go on not knowing something that mattered so much to how I understood every conversation we ever had. If we're to speak again plainly, the way we always have, I'll need your word it will stay plain. No more doorways. No more letting me believe less than the truth, because the truth felt safer to you. You have it," he said, "for as long as you'll let me keep giving it." "Then I should like some time," she said, "before I answer anything more than that." "Take all the time you need," he said, and did not move to stop her when she turned for the door, though something in his face, carefully held, cost him a great deal to keep still. She did not know then that he stood in that small warm study a long while after she'd gone, one hand pressed flat against the cold window-pane, watching the dark garden where a boy's wooden horse still lay lost somewhere under a hedge, and told himself, for the first time since his wife died, that he had done one honest thing in this house at last, whatever came of it. Iris took a week. She did not go far, only back to her room above the milliner's, where she sat many evenings turning the whole strange truth over in her hands like a coin she could not decide the worth of. She thought of Theo's small trusting weight against her shoulder that first crying night. She thought of a man in shirt-sleeves asking her plain questions and never once making her feel small for her poverty. Because he had not, in that room, been performing rank at her at all, only offering the one honest self he had left after 18 months of grief had stripped every other performance away. She thought too of Lady Corinna's laugh, 3 practised notes, and what it had cost her to stand steady on that lawn and not let it break her, and understood, turning it all over, that the Duke's silence and Lady Corinna's cruelty were not the same failing at all, one born of fear and grief and a wish to be loved plainly, the other born of nothing but contempt. She went back to Larchmere House on a grey soft morning at the end of that week, and asked for him directly, and was shown again to the small study, where he rose the moment she entered as though he had been sitting there, in some sense the whole week, waiting. "I've come to give you my answer," she said. "You owe me nothing yet. I told you, take whatever time I've taken it." She stood before him, hands folded, steady. "I want to be spoken to plainly, always, whatever the cost of the truth in the moment. I want never to be lied to again, however kindly meant the lie, and I want to keep every piece of myself that I am, the parts that are plain, and the parts that are proud, and the parts that answer back to ladies on lawns when they've no business being answered back to. I won't be smoothed down to fit a duchess's shape, if that isn't a shape I fit honestly. I would not want you smoothed down for anything," he said. "I fell for exactly the woman who wouldn't curtsy in a nursery doorway. I have no wish to lose her now." "Then yes," she said. It was the only word she needed, and she found, saying it, that she had never meant anything so entirely in her life. He crossed the small room to her and took her hand, not her gloved hand. for she had drawn her glove off finger by finger before she'd ever reached his door, some instinct in her already knowing what this visit would cost and what it would give. He held her bare hand in both of his own a long moment, as though memorizing the shape of it, red-knuckled and work-worn, and entirely hers. "I love you for your honesty," he said quietly, "and your goodness, and not for what you did for my son that first night, though I will be grateful for that as long as I live. I loved you before I ever knew your name, standing in a doorway you did not know to look at. And I love you," she said, "for a man who removed his coat and stood in a cold nursery at his own ball because he could not bear his son's crying, and never once, in all the months after, made me feel small for what I am." She looked down at their joined hands. "Though I'll admit it will take some getting used to, calling a duke by his given name." "Edmund," he said, "you've earned the right to it before almost anyone alive has." "Edmund," she said, testing the shape of it, and something in his face at hearing it broke open, unpractised, into the nearest thing to a full smile she had ever seen him give anyone. He raised her bare hand and kissed it, once, gently, at the knuckles gone red from years of work she would never be ashamed of, and neither of them reached for anything further than that. It was enough. It had always, between them, only ever needed to be enough. They were married in the spring, quietly, in the chapel at Larchmere, with Theo standing solemn between them in a small blue coat, holding his mother's hand, which was to say his new mother's hand, though the household had long since stopped thinking of the word new when they said it. Mrs. Pruitt wept through the whole ceremony and denied it fiercely to anyone who mentioned it afterward. Lady Corinna was not among the guests. She had gone to live with a cousin in Bath some months before, her invitations to Larchmere quietly not renewed, her name mentioned in the house afterward only rarely, and always without malice, only the plain acknowledgment that some people simply could not be kept close to a kindness they had never learned to value. A year later, almost to the week, the fire in the small private study burned low and gold, and Edmund Vane sat with his wife's bare hand in her head against his shoulder, watching Theo, older now and sturdier, chase a new wooden horse across the nursery floor above their heads, the sound of his laughter coming down clean through the old plaster the way. Once another kind of sound had come down and changed everything. Every good soul in that house had, in the year since, found their accounts settled, one by one. Nurse Dobbs kept her place, and her pension both, and never once complained again of a duty passed to someone gentler with it. Mrs. Pruitt was given a cottage of her own for her retirement, whenever she chose to take it, though she showed no sign of choosing it soon. The families along the Milliners' Street still found coal at their doors each hard winter, no note attached, though most of them had long since guessed whose hand it came from, and loved him quietly for never once confirming it. Iris kept, in a drawer of her own writing desk, the first pair of boots he had ever sent her, worn through now at the sole, because she could not bring herself to throw away the first kindness of his she had ever received without knowing its giver. "Do you ever think of that first night," she asked him, by the fire, her hand still folded in his, and showing no sign of wanting to be let go? "Every day of my life," he said. A crying child, and a woman who thought no one of any consequence was watching. "And was there," she asked, smiling now, "anyone of consequence watching? Only a man learning, for the first time in years, what a person is worth when they believe they'll never be thanked for it." He raised her hand and kissed her knuckles once more. The old habit now, the fire popping low behind them, Theo's laughter still drifting down warm through the floor above. I have never doubted it since. The clasped hands by the fire did not let go that night, nor on any of the nights that followed, and the house that had once rung with one child's inconsolable crying rang instead, year upon year after, with the sound of a boy's laughter and a washerwoman's four-note song, sung a little better now than it once was, though never quite well, because it had never needed to be sung well. It had only ever needed to be sung true. A kindness given where no one is watching costs the most, and is worth the most, for exactly that reason, and it is the only coin that never once loses its value in the counting. If this story warmed something in you, the kindness of a woman who asked for nothing, and the quiet man who could not stop watching her for it, then consider staying close by subscribing to the channel, so the next story finds you when it arrives. I would love to know what you think in the comments below. If you had been in that nursery doorway that first crying night, unseen and unrecognised, do you think you would have stepped forward the way Iris did, expecting nothing, wanting no one to know your name for it? Tell me honestly. And if you loved watching quiet goodness win out over cold cruelty tonight, there is another story very much like it waiting for you soon. Another house, another unwatched kindness, another heart changed by what it saw in the dark when it thought no one else was looking. Until then, take care of each other.